one thing that a man will do if he's using this kind of tactic is he's in a bit of a hurry, right? Because, Jesus Christ, I don't have 6 months to become friends with this woman. I want to sleep with her tomorrow, right? So he's in a bit of a hurry. So his effort to be a friend is kind of rushed. He really likes you, right? But he's texting you, he's talking about you, asking you questions and all these other things. But it seems kind of rushed. In a period of like a week or so, he's suddenly your friend now. That is a sure sign that something else is going on. Because if you genuinely want to be a friend of someone, you're willing to take your time, right? So the calculating seducer is probably after sex fairly quickly, right? Or an abusive relationship. So they're not willing to take their time in that area. But also, as I said, people who are narcissists, and that's a pretty broad category, but a big category of the cold male seducer, you can kind of pick up the signs in there. So they're asking you questions, but they don't seem genuinely interested. There's a kind of coldness in their eyes. I say the classic nonverbal cue of a narcissist is there's a disconnect between their eyes and their mouth. So they smile. Oh, yes, that's so interesting, Lisa. Yeah. But the eyes are dead. Their eyes are not. When someone's genuinely interested, the whole face lights up. You can't fake that. But what you can fake is a kind of a smile, but the eyes reveal. So there are signs that the narcissist isn't really emotionally involved. But the problem with a lot of women in this situation is they're not attentive. They're thinking about themselves. They're projecting onto the man images from their childhood, their father figures, previous men who've hurt them. They're not in the moment. They're not reading the fine-grained, nonverbal cues that the other person is getting. They're thinking about their problems, their history, their fantasies. But you have to you have to be in the moment. You have to look at them and see if that interest that they're showing to be your friend is actually genuine or not. And the face will often reveal that.
Ah, that's so good. One thing I'd like to add, as a woman though, also, as an adult woman, I feel like I have neglected and ignored my gut intuition.
Sure.
And so I think a big part of it is we have the gut intuition. We've been told our whole lives, or we feel like we've ignored it. We've told not to trust it. And so now I think it actually is useful to start to learn and trust your gut intuition against that. When that sort of thing happens, you don't go, well, it must be I must be crazy. Just believe what they say. You actually listen to it and you're like, what is it that my body or my mind is trying to tell me? And if it's, I don't trust this person, then the next question is why? And I love you being able to give that tactic of look at their eyes and look at their mouth. And if there's feels like there's something out of alignment, notice it and trust it. I think that's really powerful.
Well, in the past, before the internet, when people were more social and women were a little bit warier than they are now about men, right? Because becoming pregnant outside of marriage was a huge deal. They had that instinct, and it was very, very strong. A woman could pick up the signals of a cold seducer pretty quickly, but that skill has been degraded in the modern era, right? And so when you're spending so much of your time on your phone and you're judging people, the virtual thing, you're losing the sense of how to look at somebody in the moment and feel. And it's not just this thing I told you about the eyes. Some of it I can't even communicate in words. It's that gut feeling that something isn't right about this person. Something is disconnected. I can't say exactly what it is, but it's giving me a feeling that he is not who he pretends to be. There's a fine line between that and paranoia, where you're doing that to every man. Because if you become like that, then you can never have a good relationship. You can never let down your guard. So that you can go too far with that. But you should have, in the initial stages of a relationship, a woman should have a little bit of suspicion, a little bit of wariness. that has to come down. He has to earn your trust. He can't just be this instant thing that happens.
Oh God, I love the earning the trusting. I think that's super important versus just give your trust over. One thing I started to do was really start to learn my own intuition and almost train it and think of it like a skill set, because I've been ignoring it for so long and it keeps showing up, and it's like, I need to start listening to it. So instead of just taking it for fact, what I started to do is every time I had a gut intuition, I would write it down.
Can you give me an example of some?
Yes. Somebody gave me some signals where I'm like, I don't know if I can trust that person. There's something, and I don't know what, because on paper, if it was a script, it would read very normal. People would be like, there's nothing wrong. But there were certain things that they said that made me think they weren't trustworthy and that they were a flake. I had zero proof. And every time I tried to articulate it, I was like, I think I'm just imagining it, but it feels real. And within a month, of course, it completely played out the way that my gut had anticipated, and they were proven to not be trustworthy. Yeah. So that allowed me to encourage myself to listen to nonverbal cues more.
That's right. It's very important. Yeah.
All right. I want to go on to the next one now.
We're on number 3.
So number 3, it is number 3. Oh. I was like, I gotta reduce it. They're just so good, Robert. Okay. They're so good. You mentioned this earlier, but you said mixed signals. So talk to me about mixed signals.
Well, it's a very powerful seduction technique. It preys on a very elemental part of human psychology. It's something that I don't think people are so good at anymore. But the example I give in the book is of this woman who was a fantastic seductress in the beginning of the 19th century. I believe it's Madame Recamier. She was so angelic. She was just so pure and so chaste. She played the harp. You know what? That's the instrument that angels play, right? They would be salons where she would be playing the harp and there would be other musicians there. And she was very beautiful, and the men would like going crazy about her. But then what she would do is she'd be playing the harp, and then she would shoot this man a look that said something else, something a little bit sexual, something a little bit naughty. But then it was gone, and she was playing the harp again. And he'd be going, what the hell was that? Did I just pick up like some kind of interest in me that was physical? But then she went back. She's such so angelic. She's so unlike that. Right? What is it? Well, that triggers the fantasy element, right? The person is a puzzle. And the problem today, and people are so obvious. They're so goddamn obvious. They're on the internet. They're saying, here's what I have for breakfast. Here's what I love. You know, I'm just opening myself up, and this is who I am, right? But seduction involves a little bit of mystery, a little bit of fantasy. It's not like everyday life. It's not like things on Instagram. It's something different. It's theater. That's what's exciting about it, okay? So if you're the male seducer, he will be someone who seems very trustworthy, very honest, very solid. He got an MBA, he's working for Goldman Sachs. But then he reveals something a little bit rock and roll, a little bit rebellious, a little bit like he takes something else about him that doesn't quite click. Wow, I didn't know who this guy is. Maybe he's more interesting than I thought. Maybe he's not so buttoned up and so controlled as I thought. There's another aspect to him. The element of surprise that you don't know who someone is what fascinates us about a movie. When you create a character and suddenly on screen they reveal a trait that seems out of character. Wow, that's exciting. That's what makes you, that's how movies work, right? It's the same thing in real life. You create a sense of, you don't know who I am, but it has to be subtle. It's not like you're not Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. You're not half evil and half button-down banker. You're 95% banker, and you're 2 or 3 or 4% of this other thing. It's a little peak of something else that intrigues, that creates a fantasy element, okay? Now, how a woman could sense that is a tactic, it comes back down to that nonverbal element. Or the other thing is analyze what it is that's intriguing you, what it is that's making you think about the person. So from the woman's point of view, the ability to stand back and analyze a situation instead of getting immediately rushing in emotionally is probably the best thing overall for the whole thing that we're talking about today.
Okay, so number 5. See, I ditched number 4. We got create a need. So you put stir anxiety and discontent.
Well, that's one of the more evil tactics. I don't deny that. I hate to say it because I'm not really into the whole, I'm certainly not into the pickup artist scene, right? And people have associated my book with that. Because I want my book to be something a little more elevated than that. But in the pickup artist world, they have the thing called negging. Negging? Negative. Where you tell the woman something negative about them. Well, that creates a kind of a wound in them that gives you now room to now your next step is sort of kind and interested in them, but they're feeling like they want to kind of satisfy what you were criticizing. So creating a wound, creating a need for you is what a classic seducer will do. So you're pinpointing a vulnerability that they have, something that's missing in their life, and you're going to be the one that provides it. So if you actually create the need in them by something you say, and then you're the one to satisfy it, it's a very, very potent seduction technique. Now, the thing that happened with the game and the pickup artist scene in Los Angeles is that so many men were using these tactics, were using that negging tactic, that the moment a woman heard that, she knew this guy's a pickup artist, and they weren't interested in it. So it stopped working after a while. But if you see a man doing that, if he's like kind of criticizing you in a subtle way, but then it's covered up by other things going on, maybe feel like that was a tactic, that wasn't genuine, that he was doing that to kind of make me feel insecure, because an insecure person is more vulnerable to being seduced than a totally secure person.
Yeah. The problem is when you're insecure, if they touch on your insecurity in that moment, I don't think you think they're trying to touch on my insecurity. You almost think, ouch, that really hurt. God, I knew I was bad at that. See, I told you so. And it almost reconfirms what you're thinking instead of highlights that they're trying to seduce you.
That's very true. Which is why sometimes you have to be able to withdraw from your emotional responses and analyze what's going on. Now, I talk about this in all of my books. We're emotional animals. We're not rational creatures, despite what we might think. So in the moment, you're always going to be emotionally involved. You can be upset, but also you want to show the other person that they're wrong about the insecurity they created, which is a seduction technique. So in the moment, as you say, you're feeling that, and there's no way you're going to get over it. It's going to embroil you in a thought process that's going to make you even more insecure. What you need to do is the next day, you need to look back at what happened and think about it and analyze it when they're not in your presence and go, what really went on? So that would be a tactic I would really, really emphasize. On a first date particularly, the next day, mentally review what they did and what they said, and think about whether it seemed like it was genuine or natural, or if there might have been some kind of manipulative game going on, and kind of analyze it a little bit, because it's hard to do that in the moment.
Do you find that it's harder to even do that when you're the closer you are to the person? So on the first date, I think it may be a little easier to disconnect yourself, to be like,
sure,
hang on a minute, that was a little rude. Versus if you're doing it, let's say to a parent or a sibling, where you're like, that was really offensive. Do you think it's harder? And then if so, are there any tactics that you have seen or used where it's like, even if you care about them and you love them, like if it was my husband or your wife, how do we still look at that without emotion and still be able to identify that maybe it was a tactic?
Well, it's not always a tactic. I mean, I've known situations where a parent will make a comment about a woman's weight, a kind of a bitchy comment. And it's not like the person doing that has some kind of nefarious thing involved. They just don't know how to control their mouth. They're being passive aggressive in some way, right? And as you say, if it's like a parent or somebody you've been involved with for several years, it's much, much harder to take that distance. But it's very important. Now, I know people in my life who know how to trigger me like that and say something like that. And I do get upset, even though I've written all the books about not getting upset, because I can't bloody well help it, right? And then I might react and do something that I kind of regret, and then I analyze it, and then I go, what went on here in this situation, and I unspool it. Now, it's easy for me to say that because I've been doing this for years. It's why I write books. I understand that having a distance when a parent says a comment that's kind of biting or cruel, it's very hard to, like, the next day to think about that and see. But in general, I try to promote this philosophy that what people do to you is not personal. Now, people have a very hard time with that, going, well, what do you mean it's not personal, Robert? Well, what I mean by that is when somebody says something malicious or cruel or bitchy, they're not really aiming it at you. They're having problems from their own past. They're aiming it at their parent. They're aiming it at a sibling. They're aiming it at a previous boyfriend or girlfriend. They're aiming it at a colleague at work that did something to them. It really isn't personal about you in particular. It's about them and their problems. So if you take the angle that I'm not going to get emotionally involved with this because it really has nothing to do with me, that is an incredibly liberating thing to develop. I'm not saying it's easy, but that should be like the end game of a lot of our kind of self-help.
I tried to do that recently, actually, and it really worked. So I got a very negative comment in my YouTube channel.
Oh dear. What do you mean you read your YouTube comments?
Yeah, I do! I read guys at home, I read your comments. I really do. Because here's the thing.
But they're cruel, they're mean, they're awful.
Actually, not in my community. They're amazing.
On YouTube?
Yeah.
It's kind of like the Wild Wild West.
I know.
Okay.
But like, because this community is women who actually want to do better, like we all really support, I'm not to say we don't have those negative Nancys, but we've got this community where everyone wants to uplift each other. Now, every so often though, I do get a negative comment.
Sure.
And so it's usually when a video goes viral, unfortunately, but I got this negative comment and it was so rude. It was so dismissive. It was so insulting. And I just paused. First of all, I thought, what has happened to that person in their life? They don't know me. So what has happened where they've had such a visceral negative emotion towards me? I went back to what happened in their past. What was it that I've done that potentially triggered them to make them think of their past? And then instead of fighting, like I've definitely got a strong backbone, I just met them with grace. And I said, if you just took that minute that you just wrote this negative comment and told someone in your life how much you love them, how good they're doing, could you imagine what kind of world we would live in? And so that's kind of my new approach of that. It's not personal. Greet them with grace. Right. And then the final thing is, I don't think men get this as much as women, but the second as a woman you get emotional, all of a sudden you get dismissed.
Yeah.
If you have an emotional response to something, even if it's a rightful emotional response to a negative comment, if you get your back up, it's just, you're seen as like now defensive, a bitch. And so that was like kind of my new strategy of just.
I think that's very smart. That's very smart.
I'm going to go to the next point now.
Please.
All right. You somewhat covered this of number 9, which is keep them in suspense when you don't have any idea what's coming next.
So a seduction is like a story that you're telling, right? So what interests us about a story is, I don't know what's going to happen next. Therefore, I've got to turn the page. I'm watching this movie. I don't know what's going to happen to this character. All right, I'm going to keep watching it, right? So a seduction operates on that same dynamic. The person doesn't know where you're going to take them on the next date. They don't know maybe how you're going to appear, what you're going to wear, but the surprises are positive. They're interesting. They're exciting. There's gifts involved. There's places you're taking them to, but it's not predictable. It's unfamiliar. It's theater. Because let's face it, for most of us, our day-to-day lives are rather banal and rather boring. I can say that my life is very boring. I just sit in my office writing all day, right? But for us also in this world, for men in the 18th century, they were going on ships, they were crossing the ocean, they were killing people with swords, they were battling, they were going off to war. It was adventure, it was excitement. Now they're sitting in cubicles and they're typing all day. It's leading these boring, banal lives. Everything is familiar, everything is predictable. A seduction is you're taking somebody out of that world and you're taking them into something different, heightened, more dramatic, more interesting, more theatrical. Okay? So that means you're creating surprises. And so when I'm telling men how to seduce, I say that you have to kind of create these little moments where the woman is caught off guard. She doesn't know where you're taking them, what the next step is. There can be sometimes slightly negative things where it might be, that wasn't good. And then you immediately catch it up with something good, kind of a roller coaster ride, very calculated.
And is that slightly off guard then? Because you said sometimes a little bad, sometimes good. Is that part of it as well? Because if it was always good, would it not be as effective?
Yeah, exactly. It's the classic coquette strategy where you're kind of going hot and cold, hot and cold, hot and cold. Maybe the hot is 70% and the cold is 30%. But when you're cold, they're like, oh my God, what's wrong? Did I do something wrong? Because the first thing that you do is, what did I do that was wrong that made them kind of withdraw from me? Then the next moment they're smiling, they're taking you somewhere else. Oh, relief. Oh, wow, yeah. Okay, it's okay now. That's how you get involved on that kind of emotional roller coaster, and they kind of hook you that way. Because the whole game, besides getting the other person to think about you when you're not there, is to get them emotional about you. Even if they dislike you, that's okay, because that can be overcome. What you cannot overcome is indifference. So getting them to be upset, which is the whole thing about that wound, getting them to be suspicious, angry, that gives you room to turn around to seduce them because they're emotional. They're getting emotional in your presence. That emotion in your presence can now be turned into something else.
Oh, that's so true. There's actually lyrics in a song that go, I'd rather you hate me than forget me.
Yeah.
And it's a love song about a woman basically saying, I'm over you. And she's like, he says, I'd rather you actually hate me.
Right.
So I always found that like super fascinating because it still means that you care.
Right.
Whereas the indifference is like you literally don't exist in their lives and they have zero feelings towards you. And then the other thing that you said that really hit me was with the hot and cold. Before I met Tom, I had a very turbulent, toxic relationship with a guy for 4 years. And what I remember is on the good days, I would say, oh my God, thank God you stayed with him. Because then you wouldn't have, this is the moments that you love, Lisa. And then you go through the bad moments and then you get back to the good moment. And in the good moment, you're always like, oh, phew, okay, we're back here again, thank God.
The thing about that is, I don't know this person, so I don't know what this relationship is. You wonder, is it conscious or unconscious? It's both. We don't realize that things can be both. So that people may not be totally aware that they're doing that, but there's a part of them in the back of their minds that know that they are kind of creating this hot and cold game. They're creating a push and pull. So it's never completely natural or unconscious. There's an element where they kind of know that this is a very effective thing to use on the other person.
1,000%. And I think that I'm so glad that you said that because when I look back at that relationship, I realized I was just as manipulative, right? He would verbally abuse me. And so I used my sexuality. I used flirting. I used the seduction, some of the tools that we're talking about in order to make him, less angry. But none of it was deliberate. It was all, I had a feeling. I knew that this worked. And so, okay, cool. He's mad with me. Let me use this. So I'm so glad that you said that because I didn't do it deliberately. It got the result I wanted.
Right.
Okay, we're going to move on now to number 13, which is disarm through strategic weakness and vulnerability.
A woman's going to be suspicious of a man because she will think that he's more powerful, he's more male, he's more masculine, he's more aggressive than I am, right? So she's a little bit afraid. Women can be a little bit afraid of men, and rightfully so. So a very nefarious tactic on the male side is to kind of make it feel like the woman is the one in power. The woman is the one who's in control. right? I'm under her clause. She's the one that's operating this. I'm actually kind of weak. I'm actually kind of vulnerable. Well, that makes it, that takes all the trust element and goes, whoa, yeah, I feel fine in this person. To feel like you're the one controlling the man, that he's like weak and he's the more emotional one, that he needs you more than you need him, is going to make all your suspicions, disappear. But it has to happen at the right moment. That's why this is in order. That's why this is number 13. If you did that at number 1 or 2, it's like, oh, this guy's kind of weak.
That's so true.
He's too nice. I'm not interested in him. Yeah. But if he's been kind of leading you along and he seems like he's sort of in control and he's taking you through this theater, and he seems like you have maybe a little bit of fear about him, the whole thing is to reduce that fear. And at that moment, halfway through the seduction as we are, to show that you are the one who's weak and vulnerable will have a very powerful emotional effect on the other person.
Ooh, that was so strong. And specifically the order thing. That's fascinating because you're so right. I had dated guys before Tom where day 1, they're bringing flowers, they're doing poetry. Yeah. Now, what's interesting is when I was with my narcissistic ex, I was like, I just want a guy that's kind. And then I get a guy that's kind and I'm like, well, he's a bit of a pushover.
Yeah, right.
And so understanding it, you've said theater quite a few times in this interview as well, and that really does hit me. There feels like there is a theater behind, like a theatrics behind this whole thing.
Yeah, yeah. It's a trap for a man in seducing to always try and be so nice. Because sometimes a woman doesn't want somebody who's so nice, because it kind of signals weakness. And so, our sexes are different. Biology does play a role in things. And women may be afraid of, but they're also intrigued by the male, by the masculine element in a man, right? And if your first signal is poetry and flowers, I'm so sensitive, I do yoga, blah, 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 the nice thing is kind of a trap. Although for some women, it could work if they've been in totally abusive relationships, right? And you sense that. I'm talking about a very cold seducer here. And you sense that, well, being very kind and nice in the first few weeks will really have them eating out of your hand, right? Okay, so not everything is so cut and dry in the seduction world. You have to kind of tailor your strategies and tactics for the woman and her vulnerabilities. So the number one quality for a seducer, male or female, is authenticity, but to appear authentic.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So, if you are genuinely nice, then that can work. But if you are being nice because, you're insecure, then that won't work.
Oh my God, that's so true. And the authenticity piece is super interesting, but it's very complex because we want you to be authentic, but we still want you to have a backbone. And I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of pushback from women that don't feel like this. So I want to very much caveat, this is how I feel and how a lot of women I have spoken to have felt. I'm not making a general rule, but this is very true to me and my friends and people around me. As a woman, I want a man that is very kind, that hears me, that nurtures me, that takes care of me when I'm sick. But if someone's robbing my house, I want him to be a hardcore motherfucker. And I want him to stand in front of me and take a bullet. And that is the truth. And so I think that's the problem these days, where it's like we don't just say what is actually true. And so you don't, again, just speaking for myself, I don't want a guy who's just verbally abusive to me, treats me like crap, doesn't care about me, and still protects and still goes after the robber. I'd rather be alone than have that guy. And then somebody who is nice, kind, sweet, and then a robber comes and they look at me and they're like, okay, honey. No, that doesn't jive with me either. So I think that we just need to be honest. And that's what I really do love about you and your work, is that you're able to be that honest about the realities of human behavior.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. I try. That's my quest in life.
Oh. All right, we're going to move on now to number 15. Isolate the victim. And I've got a quote, even the strongest can be made vulnerable if you isolate them from their nests and safety nets.
Okay. So this is a manipulative tactic. There's no doubt about it. People have their own kind of context, their family, their friends, their workplace. And sometimes if you can isolate them from that context, they become much more vulnerable to you, right? They don't have any friends, they don't have any support anymore, so they only can rely on you. And it's something that is done over time, right? So if you're confronting with a male seducer who is trying to turn you off from your friends, who is making it so that your best friend, oh, I don't think you should trust her, I think she's up to something, right? He's trying to do things like that. He's trying to alienate you from your family. I think your parents were really awful to you, etc., is a very classic technique, because in your sense of isolation, you're much more vulnerable to getting support from this particular person. And so one of the tactics that I talk about in the book is taking the person to another country, to another place where they, even on a holiday or a vacation, where they feel unsupported, where they feel a little bit alone and isolated for several weeks, kind of break down that element and make them want to turn to you for trust and support. So if you feel that a man is trying to isolate you in the subtlest ways from your friends, from your family, from the place where you live, and is criticizing that and trying to make you feel like, maybe I don't like these things, maybe that friend isn't really somebody I can trust, this is somebody you should be very, very suspicious of. It's a terrible tactic. It's trying to isolate you socially from the things that support you. And you should be very, very suspicious, and you should not give in to that.
Mm-hmm. One of my favorite analogies is, have you ever seen like water that drips on a rock? And if it goes over and over years and years, the rock ends up changing its shape. Yeah. I think of narcissistic tactics as that analogy, because as you were describing it, imagine you have the person that's subtly giving you these negative comments about your family, subtly giving you these negative comments about your friends. Over time, you end up starting to question it. You start to look at something you never would have looked for. Yeah. And before you know it, that slow dripping effect that your toxic partner has had on you has eventually changed the way that you see the world and the way you see people around you.
Right. Right.
I've also had on my show a cult expert, and it was a guy who literally assesses cults and tries to help rescue people from cults. And one of the tactics is they remove you from your family.
Oh, completely. They become your family. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then they put you in an environment where everyone believes the same thing. That way, if you go to speak up, everyone looks at you like you're the outlier, like you're the crazy one. And so that isolation where you don't have anyone to turn to kind of like, is this normal? Is this right? Like you don't have those people around you to ask. And so now you end up feeling like it's all on you, or like you're going crazy.
And also, as you kind of alluded to, they kind of isolate you mentally, where they make you question your own values and your own ideas. Mm-hmm. So their values and ideas now are the only ones you can rely upon. So one of the isolations is from the things that you in your brain kind of use to support you, that you rely upon, the values that you hold dear. If they can chip away at that, then you're even more isolated, you're even more vulnerable.
How would they chip away at a value? Can you give me an example?
Let's say you're a religious person, right? Mm-hmm. And you believe very strongly and your belief in God is something very important to you. And they start kind of chipping away at that about, that's so irrational. How can you in the 21st century believe that somebody changed water into wine and walked on water? How ridiculous. And they're being more subtle than that. But they're slowly chipping away at a very important value that you have, which is your faith in God, right?
And then just thinking about like if they did it in a mocking tone, like I think that would be even more insulting because it's this like little comment. And then if you say, well, hang on a minute, that was really offensive. Then again, that person can come back and say, oh, you're so sensitive.
Exactly.
And they just keep turning it back. Yeah, it just keeps turning it back on you.
That's one of the strategies about insinuation. You insinuate doubts into the other person.
Mm-hmm. God, that's unfortunately powerful. So we're going to go to number 18 now, which is stir up the transgressive and the taboo. I actually was shocked to see that. So talk to me about why stirring up the taboo actually helps as part of the seduction.
Now, what shocked you about that?
I just thought it would be maybe like if someone's a little prudish, it may be like a turn off, like, oh my God, I can't believe you said that. And people can sometimes almost be offensive more than it is like intriguing.
Well, seduction involves by nature an element of transgressive and taboo. So the word itself has this kind of edge to it where we're sort of attracted to it, but we're also a little bit afraid of it. It's like something, it could be very exciting, but there's also something a little bit evil about it, a little bit naughty. And if it didn't have those two elements, it wouldn't be this very powerful word that attracts us so much. So people who pretend that they want everything to be so comfortable and easy and perfect in their life. They want everything to be good, everything to be sweet and angelic. But people are complicated. They desire the opposite of what they say they think they want, right? So underneath every one of our desires is secretly something else, secretly something maybe the opposite that we want, but we're not aware of it. And so if everything in the seduction were so smooth and wonderful and pleasant, he's giving you chocolates and roses and it's wonderful, it doesn't have that edge to it. We want an edge to things in life, otherwise we're not interested in it. It gives it something, a little bit, a whiff of danger. It's something we haven't talked about. But seduction has to have an element of danger to it. It has to be like being involved with this person. It's not like my life is at stake, but something potentially bad could happen, or there's an adventure involved that I'm not used to, where I could lose something that I value. And that element of danger is actually a spice in our life. So my view of people today is that we're too tight. We're too like this. We're too political. We're too like holding on to things we want. We're like, I call it the new prudery in the art of seduction. This is the new prudery, is our political correctness. Everything has to be this way. I'm so moral and righteous. This is what's right and that's what's wrong. And secretly, underneath it all, we actually yearn for the opposite, because it's not natural for us to be so tight and wound up. The human being wants to loosen up. We want to laugh. We want to do the opposite of what's going on in society. We want things that are unconventional. We want things that are mysterious. We want things that are weird and strange. We don't want our lives to be so tight and controlled like everything is on the media, where you say one wrong thing and 8 million people are after you, right? So an element of political incorrectness, of taboo, of something I'm not supposed to be interested in that person, but I am. How exciting. I think is a very, very important part of a seduction, because people are wound up way too tight these days and they need a release, and they need that release is something that they would never normally do.
You know what hit me as you were talking? Have you read, I don't know if you've read this, or you'll be horrified that I'm asking you if you read this. Have you read 50 Shades of Grey?
No, but my wife has, and she talked to me about it, and so I'm kind of up on what it's all about.
When I was reading, it was utterly shocking.
But that's a perfect example of what I'm talking about.
Exactly. That was what hit me.
So I do know about the book.
Yeah, that's what hit me, because I was like, when you were saying taboo, I was like, oh, well, I don't know. Like, if something's taboo and someone's a little, like, edgy, I think people will get their back up. But actually, I take that all back, because you're 1,000% right. Because the book, you would have your, I want to say, average woman who's like, maybe they've got yoga and they've got kids. They're still reading 50 Shades of Grey.
But it's not only reading 50 Shades of Grey. The whole romance fiction world is filled with 50 Shades of Grey. Where the male, believe me, because Anna's told me, she's instructed me about this. There is the hero, the male, who's got this kind of secret side to him. He's got a touch of evil to him, but the woman is going to be the one who's going to change him. And that's the whole thing even behind 50 Shades of Grey, where I think in the end she does kind of get him to settle down. That's the fantasy element. The fantasy element is, I meet this guy who's got this kind of secret. In this case, I guess he's into kind of sadism or BDSM. But secretly, the woman is attracted to that dark side of him.
you're 1,000% right. As you're reading it, you get more and more intrigued and enticed by the story, not less. And he gets her to do some crazy shit. It's pretty raunchy. And I'm reading it and I'm like finding this fascinating.
Well, there you go.
But then Tom, my husband, who nothing can shock him, he very rarely gets shocked by anything. He picks up the book and he's like, what is all the fuss about? Every woman that I've heard, you're obsessed with it. So he opens it to a random page and he reads one paragraph and he's like, oh my. He's like, even I'm shocked by this. And he's like, and it's hard to shock me. Yeah. But what was fascinating is that every woman loved it. And so do you think that's what it was? That it was
Definitely.
The storyline where you had this sweet woman who then ends up somewhat controlling this very good-looking, wealthy, dominant man.
Yeah.
And the sex around it is the taboo that keeps the thread pulling throughout the whole story.
Completely. It's a perfect example. You picked the perfect example of what I was trying to express, but you've been doing throughout this interview.
Oh, it literally just hit me in real time. I didn't even dawn on me about the taboo.
No, that's exactly what I meant.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, you should maybe read the book if you want, but...
I don't know. I might be shocked.
No, I'm telling you, when Tom was shocked, he was like, babe, I've seen people at airports reading it. And he's like, if I was a guy reading a porno that was this graphic, he's like, everyone would judge me. He's like, but every woman's carrying it around like a pride of honor. And I was like, it actually is. Yeah. It really was this beautiful moment of us women signaling each other to be like, I can handle the taboo.
Right.
Okay, so number 20, we've got mixed pleasure with pain. And you say mental, emotional, physical seduction.
Well, now we're entering the last stages of the seduction where you've been messing with the person psychologically. They've kind of had a back and forth dynamic with you where they're very excited, they're intrigued, but then they're pulling back because they're things you've done that they're not sure about. And it's like a piece of metal that's getting weaker and weaker and weaker by all the bending back and forth, and they're on the verge of breaking. And so injecting a little bit of pain at the end of this, towards this moment in the seduction, like, I'm going to leave you, it's over, I'm done with you. Man, that'll be very, very powerful because there's been so much pleasure, so much excitement, so much interest involved that at that moment that you're going to pull back or that you do something kind of heartless is going to have a devastating effect on the other person. So I'm being the evil seducer now here, but giving that back and forth dynamic where you're leading them along, where it's very fun, it's pleasurable, exciting, but there are moments of doubt and pain is what hooks the other person and gets them completely in your grasp. So if everything is pleasurable, it's not going to have the emotional impact. And if you put in, particularly near the end, these little doses of pain.
I really think it's important that you said at the end, because I think you're right, going back to the other ones. Like if you did at the beginning, you're like, well, this is an asshole. Like I'm not seeing them again. And then you'd never see them again if it's a relationship. But doing it when you feel loved, when maybe you feel like you can trust them, you've been vulnerable with them, and then they do the pain, like that. The back and forth is so true, and it kind of then goes into the other point that you made about the confusion, right? Where it's like making them confused, where it's like, oh my God, this is so amazing. Oh my God, this hurts. This is amazing. This hurts.
Yeah, well, I mean, to me, I don't know if this is going to sound too weird, but an orgasm is a kind of mix of that.
Oh, no, you're right.
An orgasm is so pleasurable it almost hurts.
You're right.
In French, they call it le petit mort, the little death. There's almost a sense of, it's too much, it's almost like I'm having a heart attack, but it's so fucking pleasurable, right? And so in the orgasm itself, which is the end goal perhaps in a seduction, this is kind of like a little mini orgasm where there's both that sense of this is so much fun, but it's also kind of a bit unpleasant, kind of mimics that sensation, if I'm not being too theoretical here.
No, I think you've hit the nail on the head, actually. Okay, we're going to move on now to number 21. Give them space to fall. The pursuer is pursued.
If you're pursuing someone so much, right, it's almost like it's getting too predictable here. Mm-hmm. And the sense of being constantly chased and sense of pursued is tiring. It's also a little bit frightening. And it's also like, where is this all ending? Right? It's going too much like you're in control of everything. If you take a step back, you're the one pursuing her, and now you step back and you don't call her as much, and you're doing your work and you're not so interested in her, suddenly she's going to have to pursue you because you've got your hooks in her so deeply. And the moment you've created this space, because think of it spatially, you're after her, it's like this, you're after her, and then you pull back. Now there's a space between you two. That space is where she's going to fall. And that's what I mean by it. So you've pulled back, and now she's going to pursue you because she doesn't want to lose it. It's been so interesting and so pleasurable. And she's so used to this dynamic that she's now going to turn around. The moment she pursues you in any way, it's over. You've seduced her. That's it. So it's got to be timed right. We're very near the end of our seduction here, because that literally means to fall, and we're like falling in love. So this is a book about getting people to love you. It's not a book about just having sex. It's all psychological. And literally falling in love is you can't control it, you're falling. So you're giving them space for them to fall, because if you're pursuing them, they're just backing up, but you want them to go like that.
I interviewed a CIA spy, and part of his techniques is to be able to convince someone to trust them and to love, right? To take their secrets. And he says that the thing that you need to do is they need to trust you, because people don't necessarily fall into love. They actually fall into trust. And it's the trust that they perceive as love. And I found that always fascinating.
Wow.
So we got number 23. So that was the last one I went to. Master the art of the bold move.
This is the end of it, the end game, which could be sex, whatever it is that you're after, okay? But the problem that a man will have in this situation is he's so worried that he's going to offend the woman, that she's going to think that all he wants is sex. He's trying to be nice, and so he's reluctant to take the last step, right? But then to the woman, that signals, you've been doing this all along. You don't desire me that much. You're not willing to do something kind of aggressive. This is the moment that the woman wants something aggressive. She doesn't want you to hit her, but she wants you to take the initiative and do something which signals that you are so attracted to her, you are so in love with her, that you're just going to like pounce on her. And that's what ends a seduction. That's what's powerful. That's what moves the other person. But the fact that you're hesitating ruins the whole effect. So at the very last moment, it's your boldness that will consummate it. It's the boldness that in this situation, the woman actually wants.
Okay, so you wrote those, oh my God, they're so powerful. And then you do a fourth one, which 24, which is kind of, you said the after effects. So beware of the after effects. What are the after effects?
Well, let's take it from, since this is, your audience is female, let's take it from the woman's point of view. The man has been doing all of these things that have quite honestly require some effort, right? He's put, if it's been over the course of a couple months, let's just give it a little bit of time. We're not doing one of those pick up in a bar 3-day kind of things. Yeah. It's been a couple months. He's been working at it, right? He's been doing these things. He's been taking you out here. He's been buying you things. You're also doing things as well. I'm not saying it's totally one-sided, but he's been putting in all this effort. Now he's got what he wants, and it's all gone, right? Now he doesn't need to take you out to a nice restaurant. Now he doesn't need to dress up nicely. He can just sit at home in his shorts and order pizza in and watch games. He starts to take you for granted, right? He stops seducing. Now, I'm saying in this 24 here, obviously you're not going to be giving the same amount of effort that you did earlier on. That would be exhausting. A couple that like you has lasted 22 years, if Tom or you were doing this for 22 years, you would have killed yourself by then. It'd be too much. No, you have to keep seducing a little bit on and on and on. You have to occasionally do surprises. You have to occasionally take them to someplace special. You have to be willing to keep dressing nicely or do something different, to have that slight theatrical, that sort of fantasy element. There still has to be a little bit of mystery involved. If the other person becomes so familiar, then the spark, then the charge between you will dissipate. So there has to be a little bit of mystery, a little bit of space still between you, and some surprise. So naturally, it's going to get lesser the longer you're together, but it can't completely disappear. And a lot of women complain, at least I've heard, that he just stopped trying, right? It just, everything suddenly I just became somebody familiar to him, and all the magic was gone, and all the things that he used to do that were full of effort, all of that has just gone like that. And it's a devastating feeling, like I'm not worth it anymore. It's all over. And that kills a relationship.
Okay, I'd really love to break down the 9 seducer characteristic types. So let's talk about number 1, the siren.
Well, the siren is like the original seductress. So I maintain in the book that seduction was a strategy that women invented thousands of years ago, because of the uneven power dynamic, quite honestly. So I'm not interested in her. The moment you show her that you're not interested in her, she's going to be much more interested in you. You're willing to play a little bit that tough part of it. You're in control. You're strategic. You know when to use absence and when to use presence, when to text them and call them, and when to disappear for a week or so and make them feel like they don't, they can't take you for granted. So know when to be nice, and you can use it to effect, but you also know when I don't want to be nice in this world. And that pertains to all sorts of situations in negotiation, etc. If you're always so nice in business, you're going to be you're not going to survive very long.
I come at this from an evolutionary perspective. Yeah. And so the reason, because I was so bad with women for so long, and then figured out how to quote unquote play the game, and it worked literally on a dime from one day to the next, I could not be successful with women I felt like within my sexual market value. Let me not oversell this, but within my sexual market value, I could be successful sort of when I wanted to be. And it was such a set of rules that I was following that I actually had to laugh out loud. I was like, I cannot believe it took me this long to just figure out that, I have to present myself a certain way, that you don't want to go for the clothes right away, that this is about a strategic revealing of your personality. It's about understanding what's going to get them exciting. You might hate this description, but it's marketing. Once you understand that you're a brand, you have to establish what your brand means. You have to make them feel some kind of way about you. The way that you're establishing your brand better be real. And one of the things I'm sure we'll talk about today is I take all of this. I've been married to the same woman for 21 years. We've been together for 23. To me, we had to seduce each other in the beginning. And then at some point, that becomes a deep, long-term pair bond, which is a totally different game. And I really hope everybody can get good at both games, because that's really how you end up having an amazing love life that will ride with you through the ups and downs. But seduction is real. People need to stop pretending that it's not. From my perspective, this is based on evolution, that women, and it's interesting because I think you push back a little bit on looking at the 30,000 foot view of men and women. I'll make a case for it. If you hate it, tell me you hate it. But here's my case. There's a quote, I forget who it's by. Forgive me, whoever said this. This is a paraphrase. Any individual woman is a mystery, but taken as a whole, they're a mathematical certainty. It was technically said about men, but you get the idea. And that makes sense to me. And so you're right. Like ultimately, I had to figure out my wife. I didn't just have to figure out women as a general thing. I had to figure out my wife. But every time I think of my wife as thinking like me, I can't predict her behavior. The second I lump her in the mathematical certainty of women are like this, then I'm way closer to being able to predict her behaviors. And so I think it's very important to understand the distinction between how men think and how women think, what we fantasize about, how we approach sex, what we think of as seductive.
Okay, but you're not going to get that from a book. So you can read all of the facts about this is how women think, et cetera, et cetera. The best way to do that is by observing them. So if you pay attention to the person that you're trying to seduce, if you start paying attention to women as young, at the earliest possible age, you will see these qualities in them. You will see the fact that they are interested more in stories, that they don't want to feel like it's just about sex and you're in a hurry to get them to that point. These aren't great mysteries that you need to read from a book. It's pretty clear if you pay attention, right? So I just want to get men out of the mode because we are so goddamn analytical. It's such a problem that reading a book, reading a text, having algorithms is the only way we can think. Get the fuck out of there and pay attention to the person. Develop your mirror neurons. Develop your observational skills. Develop the human part of you that observes, that feels what the other person is feeling. If you depend so much on things that you've learned from the art of seduction or from a book, it's going to make you a bad seducer. But to the degree that you can click into those human qualities that we all possess, where you sense the emotional tone of the other person, you sense what their vulnerabilities, you sense what they're missing in life. Yes, maybe 60% of women are missing a similar thing that there are patterns to. And maybe reading about it can kind of click that into you. Okay, fine, I'm not going to say that that's all bad. But the main thing you want is to be getting out of your head and into your emotions and into observing and into feeling what the other person is feeling and not being so head-oriented and not being so analytical. You know, that I think is the main problem that a lot of men face.
It's really interesting. My experience was I needed to understand it analytically because I didn't have the intuition for it. And it may be that I just didn't look. I don't believe people are born with intuition. I think that it develops over time. So for whatever weird reason, the intuition I developed was that if I wrote poetry and showed up with flowers on the first date, which I actually did multiple times, that would get me somewhere, and it did not get me anywhere. I was actually once, this is where you ask any kids listening in the car you turn the radio down, whatever. But this is a true story. I was in bed with a woman. We were getting naked. We were rounding third base, and I managed to mess that up because I displayed what I will call, at a moment where I should have been confident and, masculine, you might hate that word, but I displayed what I will now, God, I don't even like saying this out loud, but it's true. I displayed a more feminine trait and was like, let's not go any farther unless this means something, which isn't what I was feeling. Those exact words, which isn't what I was feeling. Well, it was what I thought she wanted to hear, and it was not, and it put the brakes on the whole situation.
Well, it's very easy to explain why that would happen, because that makes her think that, oh, maybe he's not so into it. Maybe I'm not that attractive. Women secretly want to feel that you desire them, that she is so attractive that you're going to lose control. And you didn't lose control in that moment, and you blew it. You fucked it up. Mm-hmm. So it's very obvious why that didn't work.
Yeah. Obvious to you now. Where were you back then, Robert Greene? Because I still want to punch myself in the mouth for that entire evening.
Well,
so yeah, lesson learned.
We've all made mistakes like that, though.
Yeah, I'm going to guess that one's pretty bad. So what I had to really begin to understand was what women actually were going to respond to, and not the terrible assumptions that I had built up in my mind.
Yeah.
And what I began to realize is that there are things that women want that they are not the same as what I want. And so when I started realizing, okay, making that person like what you just said, you're losing control. And that's where I think you get like the billionaire archetype of, okay, this is somebody that has everything that is normally this. You actually talk about this in your book. You say normally men get completely lost in what I think you refer to as masculine pursuits.
How often are you checking your credit score, afraid of identity theft or account breaches? We all use the internet every single day for important things like personal banking and remote work. So why not protect yourself with our sponsor, Aura? Aura is an all-in-one cybersecurity service that keeps you safe online. Aura identifies data brokers exposing your info and submits opt-out requests on your behalf. Aura also monitors your credit, tracks your passwords for data breaches, and secures your online activity with VPN and anti-malware protection. You can try Aura for free for 2 weeks by clicking the link in the description or scanning the QR code.
And so I read that to mean hyper pursuit in business, being myopically focused on something, working yourself to death, which certainly resonates with the life my wife is living right now, where I work an obscene amount. Now, if you ask my wife, what does she want? She'll say quality time, which is another way of saying, I want this person who's made a ton of money, who's at the top of the business heap. I want him to stop all of that because I'm so irresistible that he's only going to pay attention to me. And the way that makes her feel when I'm just completely focused on her, I'm not touching my phone, my mind isn't wandering, I am locked in on her. I'm making her feel physically attractive. I'm making her feel the truth, which is she is my mental equal, like all of that she's a woman I have to contend with, that she's captured my imagination, that she has taken this wild stallion as evidenced in, and I don't mean Stallion Studley, I just mean this unbroken colt that is, off running in the world of business. She's gotten a saddle on me, slowed me down, got me to pay attention to her. I mean, this is the Beauty and the Beast mythology where she is so special that she has been able to capture the attention of the person who's never had their attention captured before. Now, I've never thought about this before. I've only ever told my wife that I love you. I've never told that to another woman because I was never in love before. So for my wife, it really was the what in literary circles they call, in erotic literary circles, they call the magic hoo-ha. So for my wife, she was the only one that was able to break me out of that. She's the only person that's ever got me to slow down in my ambition, to pay attention to her. And once I could see it from not just my wife's perspective, but the general, that's what women are looking for perspective. And I was like, oh, wow. Like I really get now why she wants my attention, that isn't something I should be frustrated by. That, yeah, this is, even now, 23 years in, it's a seductive tool that I can play, which is you've completely captured my attention. Like if I see my wife and she's looking good, I'm going to stop whatever I'm doing and tell her and make sure she knows and feels it viscerally. And all of that required me to understand just the psychology of the whole situation.
Mm-hmm. I have no problem with that. Is this something that I seem to have disagreed with?
No, not at all.
Okay.
That's just me appealing to the nice guys out there of I get you either it may be insecurity, which mine was certainly driven by that, or you may think it's a winning strategy. I get that, but it isn't.
Well, one thing that I think is very seductive that I can point out here, and it has a little bit to do with what you're saying, is what I call generosity. Generosity is a very powerful seductive quality. It doesn't mean money as you might necessarily assume. It can mean money, but it means that you're generous with your attention. You're generous with what you're giving to the other person, right? So, the main thing for a man we tend to be very linear focused, mono focused on this one thing, and there's an evolutionary reason for that. For tens of thousands of years hunting, we had to just focus on one thing. Women were focusing on many different things at the same time. They can multitask. We can't. So getting out of that mono rail that you're in with your attention and being able to give to the other person and give them attention, and in the initial phases, shower them with the attention that they're not getting from other people, although you can go a little too far with that. So sometimes you have to step back and kind of be absent for a little bit so they don't feel like you're not like a stalker. You're not like, it doesn't come from an insecure place. You're in control of it. But the sense of being generous with your personality, with the time, with the attention you get is incredibly, incredibly seductive. The sense that you're not generous and stingy with money, you like take them to a cheap restaurant, you ask them to pay, you're kind of, that's a sign that you're not generous in general. So maybe that's part of the billionaire appeal, where you assume that person's going to be very generous, at least with their money. So the sense of being closed and inside yourself and stingy and not wanting to give to the other person, give of your time, your attention, your money, all these other things, that is deeply, deeply anti-seductive.
What do you think that we're living in a time right now that is complicated in a negative way by changing gender norms
Well, I don't know if I want to get into that hornet's nest, but in seduction, I make it clear, and I made it clear in my Human Nature book, that we're a mix of qualities, that nobody is completely masculine and no woman is completely feminine. Men have feminine qualities, women have masculine qualities. Some men have more feminine qualities than masculine. Some women, we're a mix. It's a chemical thing, and there's no way to predict that, right? And it's always been that way. But there's ways that kind of element of androgyny, for instance, can be very, very seductive and very powerful if you know how to use it, right? So I'm not going to say that that's overly complicating things. In fact, the sense of kind of crossing boundaries with gender is actually a sign of some of the periods in history where things were the most open to seduction. So for centuries, women could not seduce men. And I can delineate that period. I mean, going through all throughout ancient history, and I talk about it in my new book. Because to be interested in a woman so much that you wanted to give them attention and time meant that you were feminine, right? And the men were masculine. They were warriors, et cetera, et cetera. They weren't interested in the inner worlds of women. Women were there to clean the house and to make babies, essentially. So seduction was not something that really existed in the ancient world, except with some exceptions like Cleopatra, et cetera. So the idea that you're interested in a woman and in her world is already admitting there's a feminine element within you. And so I look at moments in history, and I just wrote about this, like in the Middle Ages, where our whole notion of love came from, at least the Western notion. Or you look in the 18th century, the grand epic of seduction with Casanova and all those characters. You look at the 1920s in America and in Europe, a period of incredible sexual energy, freedom, and seduction. These were periods where there was a lot of androgyny going on. So I don't necessarily think that that's something that's going to limit the seductive qualities and the energy that's in the atmosphere. I think what's hindering us is not the gender norms. It's more our kind of defensiveness, our closed spirit, our desire to be completely in control of our circumstances by withdrawing into our egos and being afraid of being hurt, being afraid of being wrong, being afraid of not being strong, et cetera, et cetera. I think that has a more inhibiting factor on seduction in the world.
Why do you think young people are having so much less sex right now?
Well, for men, a lot of it has to do with porn. I mean, I'm not sure. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a sociologist, but that would be my estimation. Where first of all, they're having a lot of sex virtually. And second of all, their idea of sex and what is pleasurable and what a woman should be like comes from those ideals in pornography and the look, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's not as much of a need for them, et cetera, to kind of physically, we've become much more virtual in how we get pleasure in life. Also, I think there's an element of fear, as I said. I mean, young people have grown up in these periods of massive economic instability. They've had to deal with the 2008 collapse, with the pandemic and everything that's happened there. So they've had to deal with circumstances that are very powerful and that are going to make them anxious, as well as all of the helicopter parenting that many of them had to live through. So they're filled with much more anxiety right now than I think in my generation. And that anxiety makes you want to kind of retreat into your own inner world. And having sex, at least for a man, and you can probably relate to this, it's a feeling of it's almost like too much. You're almost like weak afterwards. You're almost like afraid of it. You're afraid of the power that a woman has over you, right? You obviously get over that very quickly and you deal with it. But there's an element of fear involved. And especially when you're an adolescent, especially when you're younger. And so I think the levels of fear and anxiety that young people are having in the world, and rightly so, I don't condemn that for that, is probably why there's less physical, sexual, and psychological interactions with members of the opposite sex.
Yeah, I think it's inevitably going to be a very complicated issue. And like you, I'm not a scientist, but I am always willing to talk about things that I know nothing about, just to walk people through how I think about a problem. So looking at it, I think that a big part of the problem is what you were talking about with insecurity. I think that the way the world is set up right now, whether it's pornography, whether it is a society that's really spent the last several decades telling men that their masculine impulses are bad. And for better or worse, I think that male sexuality is tied up in power. And I think sex itself is dances around power dynamics. It's one of the main things in female erotica is power dynamics. And you want to dive into a hornet's nest, like power dynamics. People get real weird about this subject. But with all of that, if men are either because the economy is weird and they're not able to get on the property ladder and they've got, $180,000 in debt and they don't feel like they're going anywhere and they're lost in a sense of hopelessness, they have easy access to pornography, they're just not feeling powerful. And if they're not feeling powerful, then they're going to struggle to feel confident in the bedroom. And I mean, just to really put it all out there, I think a guy has to feel confident and powerful, not in a weird, like I'm a dominant way, but strong and confident, rooted in his body and feeling good about himself to get and maintain an erection. Like, you're not going to see a lot of people who are insecure, scared, sporting erections. Those are sort of flip sides of the same coin.
Unless they take a lot of Viagra or something.
I guess, but do you really think?
I don't know.
Like, I would be surprised. It just, that puts you in, and also just bodies, right? So diet and nutrition now are so horrible that I have to imagine a lot of people are just physically not in a place where they're feeling good about themselves. You wrap that all up and you get to what I'm sure is the tip of a very large iceberg that I've grossly oversimplified. But
No. I think you touched upon a point that's very valid. And I didn't touch upon it. I think is very true. Is that it's not a good time to be a man right now. It's very confusing. Our role models are very mixed up. We don't really know what is a positive virtue for a man. We think that we look at somebody like Andrew Tate as possibly an icon. At least a lot of young people do, which I don't at all. I think it's really gross and vulgar and full of all kinds of insecurities, a man like that. A kind of an icon, sort of a sense of strength from either a political figure, a leader, or an actor, or anything that used to be in the culture. We don't really have that. And men are seen as something kind of ugly in our culture. It seems like ugly energy that comes from men. And every time I read the newspaper, I see that kind of slant on things. Anytime a man is sort of revealing a kind of atavistic trait of being kind of dominant and strong, ugly. Oh, he's awful. He's primitive. He's not, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's very, very confusing. And I remember being a young man myself. Growing up, I'm such an old person that I can remember like the late 60s, and it was kind of confusing then. And I was struggling. And I had a good role model with my father. He was very gentle, but he was also quite masculine, etc. And I remember being confused about it and kind of straining and trying to find a proper masculine role model. And it was a struggle. And I found it sometimes with my teachers, my professors in school, and other people I later gravitated to. But the sense of, this is what it means to be a man. These are good qualities. The quality of being a leader, of being strong, of even being kind of dominant and being able to dominate a group and dominate a room, or to be so powerful that your voice can carry. These are all positive traits. We wouldn't be here right now, Tom, talking, you and I, if men didn't have those traits, right? If they didn't have the courage to face, enemies with spears, et cetera, et cetera. These are all positive qualities that just have to be channeled in socially productive ways, which is what an Andrew Tate doesn't do. But if only we could craft a Frankenstein monster of what an ideal male figure would be like, it would be very, very helpful for young men. And I don't mean to craft it in a fantasy way. It would be great if there were really people like that, in this world today. So To me, a masculine quality is a kind of inner strength, a confidence that doesn't need to yell, it doesn't need to scream, it doesn't need to bully people. It's just so strong that people are attracted to it, and it emanates, it radiates itself, and people can feel it, so you don't have to yell at someone. I remember when I was on the board of directors of American Apparel, and the CEO, who we ended up firing, he was a good friend of mine. He's brilliant in some things, but he was yelling at people left, right, and center. He thought that's what power is. That's what being masculine is. And I thought it just showed incredible weakness. The ability to set an example, to tell people this is how you should be by how I'm behaving, etc. Taking responsibility. That's a masculine quality, not blaming other people. We need to redefine what it means to be masculine and what are the positive aspects of it. I think it's very, very critical for our culture.
Talk to me about aggression. I think men should have a gear that is aggressive. Should be a gear. I don't think they should live there. What do you think?
Completely. And my wife can attest to this. I'm an insanely competitive person, right? To the degree that it's almost maybe unhealthy. Right? So like I'm bicycling up a hill and people pass me. God damn it, you can't pass me. I'm going to pass you, even though right now I can't because I'm physically weaker. I'm still trying to do that on my stupid recumbent bike, etc. I'm very, very competitive. And that competitive energy, I think a lot of men have. It's what directs us towards sports, and I'm a sports addict, etc. Being competitive is allied with being ambitious. And getting back to seduction, a man who seems ambitious is very, very seductive. And having no ambition is very unmasculine and very anti-seductive. But we see the word ambition as being kind of ugly, as if it's like egocentric, as if it's selfish. But damn it, this world was built by people who are ambitious. They created it. Right? You wouldn't be here. You wouldn't have the internet. You wouldn't have all your little tools that you whine and complain about if it weren't for people who were incredibly ambitious. Ambitious people have created the world. So men have aggressive energy. It's the testosterone flowing through us, right? You can't repress it. You can't get rid of it. It's there. And how you channel it is the key. You can become very self-destructive. You can channel it towards violence. You can channel it towards pushing people around. Or you could say, I'm going to channel it towards being competitive, towards being the best person at what I'm doing. We talked, I think, last time I was here when I was talking about the human nature, we talked about Kobe Bryant, a man who had a dark side. He is so competitive to a degree where it could have killed him. It was just awful. And he acknowledges it. He channeled it into the basketball court and it made him fantastic, one of the greatest players ever. It's how you take that energy, that testosterone, that aggression, and what you do with it that's the critical factor. And that's where I think a lot of men are confused about it.
For the people out there who believe that their life is boring and that they're wasting it, what trap have they fallen into, and what advice do you have for them to get out of that sense?
Well, you were talking to me we were talking earlier about diet and problems with your health, and you're saying get at the root cause. So you have to get at the root cause of your boredom. And most often you're